Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week, we're continuing our Metroidvania coverage, this time switching over to the Castlevania side. I think we got some good ones coming up in here, Mike. What do we got?
We got some real bangers today,
yes.
Tyler. So we're going to talk about Castlevania games, and I was doing it by console. Like I did NES, and then I did Game Boy, and now we're just going to say the 16-bit generation, because we have some Super Nintendo games in here. We have a Sega Genesis game in here, and we also have a PC Engine CD, aka the TurboGrafx 16 in here as well. So
okay.
It's a weird mix-up. It's going to be an interesting one today. So the sources I used today were, of course, like Wikipedia and the Castlevania fandom wiki, but there's also a couple videos I watched that were really good. Stray Fox has a video titled The Making of Super Castlevania IV and Bloodlines, which are two of the games we're talking about today. That was kind of perfect and also a really good video. And then Slope's Game Room does a complete history of Castlevania, and that's just kind of what it's... If you just type Slope's Game Room, complete history of Castlevania, that'll pop up. And that one doesn't go into as much detail as the Stray Fox one does, but if you're just looking for some overall context, it's really good. Also, I am intentionally skipping a lot of weird remakes and arcade ports specifically, and those are all covered in the Slopes Game Room video. So if you want to know more about the obscure arcade ports, definitely check out that video. Okay. Also, something that I missed, and it's going to come up in today's episode, that we should have spoke about with Castlevania, and maybe even in the Metal Gear episode. Konami had a pretty horrific corporate culture, is what I would describe it, in the 1980s and 90s.
Oh.
And yeah, the big example of this is the guy who created Castlevania, Hitoshi Akamatsu, was demoted after a few years of creating Castlevania 3. Now, in one of the videos I watched, it said he was demoted to like legitimately working in a Konami arcade.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true.
Why would you stick around if that happens?
I think he didn't. And he has faded into like obscurity. He hasn't done an interview since like the 1980s.
Wow.
So I just kind of wanted to mention that as like being a big deal, because the way Konami
seems like
worked,
really mean.
It was so money driven. Like it was driven by success and money. And they talk about that more in the Slopes Game Room and the Stray Fox videos. But apparently it's like, if a game's a hit, you get to stay. If a game's a dud, you get moved to a different development team and hoping you work on another hit or not. Like, it's just like that. And like, for example, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a big hit at this time. So if you worked on that game, hey, guess what? You're still in it. And they were divided up by console. So you'd have like an NES team, multiple NES teams, multiple Super Nintendo teams, multiple Sega Genesis teams, multiple TurboGrafx teams or whatever, and you would be all over these different games. And if they were hits, you would do well personally, and if they were failures, you would be demoted. It was,
yikes.
Yeah, it's pretty gross is how I'm going to put it. I think that's an okay way to put it.
Yeah,
I was just like, yeah, it's not great. So, okay, so now let's move on though to Super Castlevania IV. And here are the grime facts. It was developed by Konami. The release date in Japan was October 31st, 1991, December 4th in North America, and then November 23rd, 1992 in Europe. It's on the Virtual Console, or was on the Virtual Console for the Wii. It was on 2013 for the Wii U, and then it was also in 2016 for the new Nintendo 3DS.
Right.
And in September 2017, it was actually on the Nintendo Super NES Classic Edition. You remember those little replicas?
Oh, yeah, I got one. I got two. I brought one from Japan that Matt in Japan sent me.
Well, that one has Super Castlevania IV on it. So there you go. And also, this is on the Anniversary Collection, which is probably the best way to just play it now, if you want to play it. Unless you have the cool NES Classic Edition, which I don't even think they make anymore. I think it was like a limited run thing, right?
I think you're right, yeah.
Now, the number of copies sold, we have about 500,000 copies worldwide at launch. Who knows what that's like now? It did well, though. It did very well. Genre or gameplay style, it's action platformer. It's Metroidvania, which is the whole reason we're doing this. In the awards, accolades, or groundbreaking achievements section, in the 1997 Castlevania retrospective, GamePro said, quote, "It is still one of the all-time best games." Just
high
period.
praise. In 1997.
In 1997, yeah. In 2006, Nintendo Power listed it as the 66th best game made on the Nintendo system, period. Any Nintendo system.
Wow.
66th best game. And the official Nintendo magazine placed the game at number 70 on their list of 100 best Nintendo games ever. So pretty high praise for Super Castlevania IV. The average time to complete is 4 to 5.5 hours, and there is no Metacritic score because this is before that, but it did have a game ranking score of 82.06%, which, while that's lower than Belmont's Revenge, keep in mind this game was reviewed way more than Belmont's Revenge by way more viewers, and so it's overwhelmingly positive.
That's how you can get that specific, the 82.06%.
That's right. This game had a lot of reviews. Plot-wise, I'm not really going to talk about very much because, chronologically speaking, you are once again Simon Belmont. This is not a sequel. This is straight up a retelling of the original Castlevania, is how I'm going to call it, a retelling. The story is told a little differently. It's not an alternate timeline or anything. They just essentially rebooted Castlevania and added some sweet new stuff to it that we're going to talk about to make it really good. Gameplay-wise, Super Castlevania IV, side-scrolling platformer. Yeah, we're all there. We're still in it. It has 11 levels total. You start with 5 lives, and like every other video game in the entire world, if you run out of lives, it's over. This Castlevania game, though, like the older titles, does have a time limit. So that's another way you can die. And honestly, I think that is my personal least favorite thing about really like retro games, period, is the time limit. I don't understand.
And scores that they had for a long time. Like, who cares about the score in Super Mario Brothers? But it was there.
Yeah, I just don't. Unless the score actually does something or the time actually does something, like for speedrunning's sake, I don't really care. Yeah. And even if it was
I'm okay with a game keeping track of time, but to like make time be, or at least in these old platforms, to be like, you need to finish it in this amount of time or it's over, or finish this level in this amount of time. That's kind of a bummer. But like Metroid keeps track of it and gives you a different ending depending on how fast you do it, which is, I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it almost feels like they said to themselves, well, we had in arcade versions, we had a timer that if it ran out, you have to put another quarter in. So we got to keep that party going, I suppose. Yeah. The health gauge that you have in Castlevania IV, Super Castlevania, can be brought up by food items that you can get from breaking candles or blocks like the old Castlevania. There's also a magic crystal that's defeated after defeating each boss at the end of the level. And then apparently you eat the magic crystal and your health gets full, which is cool. Because who doesn't want to eat a magic crystal? So
I would eat a magic crystal for sure.
Oh, I know. I say that to people about you all the time. So this game is on the SNES, which I think means they could have done saved games for it. There were SNES games with saved games, but they didn't. So it's got the good old faithful password system that everyone loves. Just kidding. No one loves it. Everyone hates it. Okay. Simon's whip can actually now attack in 8 directions. This is a huge change from the previous Castlevania games. So you got diagonal 4 ways, up and down, left and right, 8 directions. Another really cool feature of the whip they added is if you hold down the attack button, the whip goes limp, and then you can like wave it around with a control pad, and you can use that to block projectiles, which is pretty nuts. Yeah, it's pretty nuts. And that was actually designed by Mitsuru Yaida. And they are the person that implemented like everything that you can do with Simon Belmont and a lot about the whip system. And that's one of the big standing things that was like, oh, wow, look at this game. Look what they're doing. It's so unique, you know?
Oh, man. Super Nintendo really crushing it.
Really innovative. But anyway, the length and power of the whip can also be increased if you collect those Morningstar items, which I believe we had in previous Castlevania games. So I've talked about those a little bit. And the whip can not only be used for fighting, but also for latching onto rings and swinging over pits Indiana Jones style.
Nice. That's cool.
That's what we always needed in Castlevania. So
more Indiana Jones.
Yeah, all Indiana Castlevania. That's what we need. So that just makes it sound like there's a vampire castle in the state of Indiana. That didn't work at all. Okay. So like its predecessors too, because this is essentially a retelling of the old Castlevania, we have secondary weapons, and they are the axe, which can be thrown in the arc, a watch that stops all enemy motion on the screen, and then the dagger, which can be kind of thrown as a ranged weapon. And you can also collect these items called the double and triple shots that do exactly what you think they do. You can throw the axe twice in a row or 3 times in a row, depending on what you pick up.
Nice.
The development of Super Castlevania is pretty interesting because we had 3 Castlevanias being developed at the same time. Super Castlevania IV was directed by Masahiro Ueno, who is actually like brand new to the series. And then Hitoshi Akamatsu, the person who made the first Castlevania and the second Castlevania, is now working on the third one for the NES. And then the third Castlevania being developed at this time is Rondo of Blood, which we're going to talk about after this. And that was on the PC Engine CD, also known as the TurboGrafx 16 in the United States.
Wow, just covering all the bases.
Yeah. And this is how Konami operated. They really were like, we are working like at all different times with all these teams and making as many games as possible because it's time to get that money, you know? Gangbusters, hotcakes, the usual.
Hotcakes.
So Super Castlevania IV was actually Masahiro Ueno's first 16-bit game he had ever made. And there's speculation they started working on the game in 1989, but there's really no definitive start date. The only thing we know for sure is that Ueno's team started development with an NES because the dev kits for the Super NES weren't out yet. So they had to kind of guess and figure out what they were going to do a lot of the time, which I think is kind of an interesting way to develop a game. Sounds kind of
that's cool.
Tricky, you know? But the one thing that did work is it kind of worked out because when they did get those Super Nintendo dev kits, they were actually able to like get going on development pretty quickly because they had planned so much. This game was really designed to be less frustrating than the first Castlevania game. And they did this by focusing on game design and controls of the player, and less so on the story. So one thing they did is they allowed the player to control Simon when he walked upstairs, which is huge because in the older games you couldn't do that. And they also really focused on the bosses as having a more detailed pattern of what they did going back and forth. So you can kind of memorize the pattern and kind of figure it out yourself, you know?
That's good.
Yeah. And then also from there, they worked on making it just look really, really good. Like if you watch YouTube videos of this game, the stages look way more alive than they did before. Like the backgrounds are moving. You see like animals and it looks way better than the old Castlevania did. It really does look super, if you will. Some of the ideas though from like previous Castlevania games were scrapped in favor of being more like the original Castlevania. So there's no branching stages. That's not in here at all. There was a river level that was originally supposed to take place on a raft, and then they just completely got rid of the raft, so you're kind of just wading through a river. There's a really cool boss that is a rock golem that scales and gets bigger and smaller, which is pretty revolutionary for the time. And that was
like Super Nintendo classic.
Yeah, and that
like, we can make things scale and stretch and stuff. So let's do it.
Look at all this crazy stuff we're doing. Yeah, it's pretty much exactly what it is. The one other thing I wanted to mention is that I think it's kind of cool is Ueno worked on both the Japanese and English versions of this game, which is kind of rare. Like there was not a localization team, but the cool part about it is that means he actually got to choose like how they censored the game. Because as you know, in the US, they were not cool with blood. Not a big fan of it. So they had to change a lot of the blood and the color palette of the game. The best thing ever, though, about this game and what made me laugh when I was researching it is whoever the copywriter was for the English version of the instruction booklet is a true hero because they took the names of the enemies and did some pretty amazing stuff. The severed horse head enemy is just called Mr. Head, an homage to Mr. Ed. There's a skull with like a really long tongue, and it's called the Puexil, Puwexil, which if backward is lick 'em up. It's a Pumexil. So it's lick 'em up backwards. But the all-time greats are these two dancing bosses you fight, and they are named Paula Abdul and Fred Astaire. So whoever the copywriter is of Super Castlevania,
they had a good time.
They had a really good time doing
Fred Astaire, Paula Abdul.
Tom Dubois once again did the artwork for the American version because Konami had their own in-house artists. And then there was a short demo of the game running on the Mega Drive that Factor 5 did, and they like kind of pitched it to Konami, but Konami's like, no, we do all our Mega Drive development in-house, so there was never a Mega Drive port of Super Castlevania 4. But they would get their own Genesis game that we're going to talk about soon. And then one other thing that I think is really cool about this game is the music. And I know that's something that a lot of Castlevania games focus on. And I just want to say, like, you should go listen to the music for this game if you can.
It's good.
It's really good. Also, the next game we're going to talk about, Rondo of Blood, has amazing music. And just go listen to it and then go put it on a playlist somewhere and then just go jog to it or something. I don't know what you want to do with your life, or study to it. It's great. It's really good. And the music in this game was composed by Masanori Adachi and Taro Kudo. And they are also credited as different names because Konami didn't want you to use your real name in the credits of a video game, which again goes back to what we talked about with their really weird corporate culture. It's just odd, I guess.
Yeah, I thought that was done by the time Atari like quit doing that. You know?
Nope.
Because that was Atari's thing for a little while, and that's why Activision was formed, is because they were like, but we want to put our names in this game.
Yeah, and there are definitely people that leave Konami to start their own companies because they do not like the culture of Konami, which is pretty interesting. Yeah. But overall, talking about Super Castlevania 4, it's a really strong entry in the series, to the point where if you are apprehensive to play the first Castlevania because you're like, this is on the NES, it's not like you just don't think you can do it and it's really hard, I would just jump to Super Castlevania 4. Like that's a really good, because you'll get the essence of the old game, but with a newer, nicer 16-bit look. That's what I'm going to say about it. So check that game out. And also, I mean, for a remake, it's a really good remake. So, okay.
Nice.
Now we're going to move on to probably the sleeper hit of this episode, and that is Castlevania Rondo of Blood. This was developed by Konami on the PC Engine CD, which in the United States is known as the TurboGrafx 16. The CD version is only available in Japan, and it came out on October 29th, 1993. There was then I'm going to call it a port, but really it's an altered version that came out on the Super Nintendo system on July 21st, 1995 in Japan, September 1995 in the US, February 22nd, 1996 in Europe, and then June 22nd, 1996 in Australia.
Hey, that's a couple of years later.
Yeah, way later. There's also a PlayStation Portable version of this game that came out in late 2007 or early 2008, depending on where you lived. NA and Japan got it in October and November, respectively, 2007, and then the European version came out on February 18th, 2008. There's no sales data for this game because it's old. It was for the TurboGrafx system, and no one cared about that kind of stuff. I couldn't really find any like official awards, but to a lot of people, this is the hot collector's item of Castlevania. And we're going to talk about why when we get down to our development section, because honestly, I could not find a lot to talk about with development. There's just not a lot mentioned. But the average time to complete, according to howlongtobeat.com, is 3.5 to 8 hours. And the Metacritic score...
It's a pretty long range.
Yeah, that's like completionist if you want to play 8 hours.
Okay.
But also... there is no Metacritic score, but the PSP version averaged between 70 to 80%.
The PCP version is way different.
Way different version. It's a lot more screaming. This game actually takes place in 1792, and you are the 19-year-old Richter Belmont. And you are in the Belmont family, so your job is to kill vampires, and you have Vampire Killer, the Whip, and you are Simon Belmont's direct descendant, and you go to the castle after your beloved Annette is kidnapped by Dracula's servant, whose name is Shaft. Apparently, he's a police officer. I don't know. That's just a weird name. And it was all a trap. Spoilers, it's all a trap. And you got to go rescue Dracula, rescue Annette, and defeat Dracula. So there are 9 stages in this game with 4 alternate routes, and Richter has his whip as the main weapon, but there's also 6 sub-weapons this time: an axe, a dagger, holy water, grimoire, a pocket watch, and a cross. And while you explore the castle in this game, there are actually 4, they're called 4 maidens that you can rescue, and one of them is named Maria Renard, and it is actually Richter's relative, and then she becomes a playable character, and it turns out she is way better than Richter. Like, she attacks, she does more damage. Her attacks do more damage. Her 6 sub-weapons are a white tiger kitten, a dragon whelp, a baby phoenix, a turtle, an egg, or musical notes. She could do a double jump. She does twice the amount of damage as Richter. And she has these doves that shoot out of her and do damage. And it's just like, she is, if you're trying to beat this game, I highly recommend you use Maria Renard, it sounds like. And this is actually intentional by the developers because instead of putting in an easy or a hard mode, they have Maria, which is the easy mode, or Richter, which is the harder mode, because Richter doesn't do as much damage.
Just different characters change the difficulty.
Yeah, which I think is really cool. Rondo of Blood also incorporates stuff from early Castlevania games, and but they wanted to emphasize like the untimed exploration aspect of it, so you don't have a timer in this game, which is great. I think that's a really solid thing.
Yeah, that's good.
Also, each stage has like a clear beginning, but the more you go into each level, the more it like branches off, and there's like other environments and monsters, and it's cool because you can really branch away. It's not just a super linear game like the previous game we talked about. There's money, hearts, and food that you can find all over the place. And then there's also like, I think the hearts and food are just used. I believe the money is just score. Once again, we're talking about score that's meaningless.
Yeah,
but classic. So this game by far is considered one of like the sleeper hits of the Castlevania series. And Konami had success with the PC Engine and PC Engine CD, and they said, hey, you know what? Let's maybe make a Castlevania title for this console, and we'll just print money. And they were right. That's exactly what happened.
Guaranteed to sell like hotcakes and gangbusters?
Yeah, but the very interesting part of this is because it was one of the first games in Castlevania on CD-ROM, this is the first game to be fully voice acted as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and also the CD enabled there to be animated cutscenes, so it has those as well.
Wow.
And
well, that sounds like a good reason for it to be like kind of expensive or collector's-y.
Yeah, also the music's really good because there was a dedicated onboard sound chip.
Oh, they could use CD quality audio probably.
Yeah, and this soundtrack is considered one of the bangers of the Castlevania series, so highly recommend you look this up too. The funny part, though, is this game only came out in Japan because the NEC got in an argument with who I assume is Konami, and the NEC were responsible for releasing TurboGrafx games in the United States, and because the PC Engine and the TurboGrafx 16 are the same thing, and they thought it wouldn't do well in the US, so they just didn't release the game in the US. And this, if you recall, was actually a big problem with the TurboGrafx 16 in general, is that they couldn't get the ports put onto the system. And that's a big reason why it failed. It had no games.
Oh, they couldn't bring games to the US or something?
Mm-hmm. In general, it's kind of a reason the TurboGrafx 16 just didn't really do well.
That's why most consoles that fail. Ain't got no games. You gotta have games.
You gotta have games to make a good console. Rondo of Blood has had like a really big impact in the series, though, because this was the turning point, not only graphics wise, but like audio, music, the breaking like paths. Like this is just everything you want in that Metroidvania style. And the sequel to this game, the direct sequel to Rondo of Blood, is a little game called Symphony of the Night, which we will get to soon. And that is, as everyone knows, considered to be one of the best Castlevania games, if not the best Castlevania game. But because this game was released only in Japan on the PC Engine CD, it is also one of the rarest Castlevania games and easily goes for $100 on eBay if you want a copy of this game. So,
dang, for a CD copy of it on TurboGrafx?
On the PC Engine CD, yeah. There's also, like I said before, there was a Super Nintendo remake. It's fine, is how a lot of people put it. It's not great, though, because it's not on CD, so they had to sacrifice all the cool things about
the
this
audio
game.
quality and
the cutscenes, the voice acting, the audio quality, the music. It all had to get sacrificed so it would fit on a cartridge. Yeah, and Maria is not a playable character in the Super Nintendo version also.
Aww.
Yeah, so it sacrificed a lot. That came out in 1995 or 1996, depending on where you live. Then there is a game on the PSP that I mentioned before. That one is called Dracula X Chronicles, and it's kind of a 2.5D version of this game, and it also included Symphony of the Night on it as a remake as well. So those are 2 remakes. Probably won't talk about those when we hit those in the timeline, just because I mentioned them here, and they really are like remakes or reboots of the...
Yeah, there's not a whole lot that they add besides just,
Yeah, so there was also a direct port of the original version that was on the Wii's Virtual Console and is like considered an import title like outside of Japan, but there was like no translation made outside of Japan, and the English Virtual Console version is still altered, so it's like the PSP intro audio. It's like really weird. It's like a butchered version of the original game, and so I mean it also doesn't exist anymore. So unless you have a Wii Virtual Console where you downloaded this version of the game and you still have it on there and you haven't connected it to the internet, then you don't have a version of this game. So
that's weird.
Yeah, it's really weird because this game is a big hit in the series, but there's just not a lot about it. I just couldn't, even in those videos I was searching for and watching, like I couldn't find like anything about the actual like, hey, they developed it this way because of this. It's just like, oh no, Konami wanted to print money, so they put it on this console. That's pretty much how it works. Okay, so now we're on to the final game of the day today, and that is Castlevania Bloodlines. And this is released once again developed by Konami at the same time as things were going on back with the other games. And this game came out on Sega Genesis.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're just covering all the systems.
We really are. The 16-bit generation, like each one got a version of a Castlevania game, which is kind of neat. So December 1993 in North America, February 1994 in Europe, and then Japan got the game in 1994, which is weird, like March 1994.
They got it later.
Yeah, which is very interesting. So this game is included in the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, which I will say is the best version to play this game, unless you have a Sega Genesis Mini. Because this game is on Sega Genesis Mini, which I think is really cool because we never get to talk about the Sega Genesis Mini, you know?
Yeah.
So if you have a Sega Genesis Mini, it turns out you own Castlevania Bloodlines, and spoilers, it's a really good game. So you should definitely play that, and you should tell us about it and send us an email because I'm curious. Number of copies sold, completely unknown. We don't know. The genre...
Too old.
Too old. Too old, didn't read. Didn't play. Too
old, didn't count?
That works, yeah. TODC, too old, didn't count. So
yeah.
It's got, as far as accolades go, it actually, like, some magazines gave it some cool credit. Games Radar named it the 8th best Genesis game of all time out of their list of 25.
Okay.
And then in Game Informer, Tim Turi praised the level of gore relative to other Castlevania franchises because, like we said before, like Sega Genesis, they're the cool console, so they can do like blood and gore. And he described it as, quote, one of the most overlooked treasures in the franchise. And then in 1997, in a 1997 Castlevania retrospective, GamePro said that while the graphics and sound were not as impressive as those of the Super Castlevania IV, it was a strong game by Sega Genesis standards. So not as great a praise, but, you know, I think this game's pretty cool. And when we get to the plot and what they did with it, it's actually really cool. So the average time to complete is about 2.5 to 5 hours, and there is no Metacritic, but it has a game ranking score of 83.5%. So plot-wise, this is where things get bananas. You ready, Tyler?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not going to read it directly, but I'll tell you what's going on. So in 1897, Dracula finally was like donezo. He can't come back anymore. He's dead. Okay. And he was laid to rest by Quincy Morris, who is a descendant of the Belmont family, but is also a character from Bram Stoker's Dracula. So we got some crossover going on.
So now
here.
we're intertwined with Bram Stoker's Dracula. So this is canon now.
This is
canon.
Bram
Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah. Okay. And then so peace was restored to Europe until World War I.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's right. It's getting geopolitical. Castlevania is getting geopolitical. And this game is an alternate history where Elizabeth Bartley, who, if you recall, was like a woman from history that like was famous for like bathing in blood. She was like a weird, like, I guess you could say kind of like an occult personality is how I would describe it.
Okay.
The story is that she started World War I so she could bring back Dracula. That's this.
She assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand?
Yes. And so fast forward to 1917 when World War I has started, and you are either John Morris, who is a distant descendant of the Belmont family, or Quincy Morris's son, or you play as Eric Lecard, whose girlfriend was transformed into a vampire by Elizabeth Bartley, and you're seeking revenge. And Eric Lecard has Alucard's staff, and that's his weapon.
Oh.
So there's like John Morris with the whip, or there's Eric Lecard with the staff. It's really neat. It's a really cool idea. So gameplay-wise, you now have these two characters where they each do different things, but I'll get to that in a second. So you got 6 linear stages. You're fighting, not just this is out of the castle. We're taking it out of the castle now. Okay, Tyler? There's going to be a castle, but it's not as big.
Okay, but we got to get there first.
We got to get there, which means we got to go to Atlantis. We got to go to the Palace of Versailles. We got to go to the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's a lot of, it's very detailed. Also, the setting is just like, it's actually like they're really good. Like if you put up, they talk about it in the video for the Stray Fox video, they put side to side like a picture of the Castle of Versailles or Palace of Versailles and a picture from the game, and they like look really good, like line up, like they pixelated it essentially.
Nice.
It looks really cool. So like I said before, you have two characters, and each one kind of controls differently, and each one can access different areas of the map based on the powers they use. So John Morris is your traditional Belmont with a whip, and you can upgrade the whip 3 times instead of 2 times, and you have access to 3 sub-weapons. And then the 4th power-up actually changes the Vampire Killer Whip into a Flame Whip that boosts the capability of your sub-weapons, so it like upgrades you fully.
Dang, sounds intense.
So John also can whip downward while in the air, which is a new thing. And he can also use the whip to swing from the ceilings as well. But Eric Lecard's cool thing is he has the Alucard spear. I think I said staff earlier. It's a spear. I apologize. And he has way longer range, but does less damage than John. And he can upgrade that spear 3 times. And Eric has the same sub-weapons as John does. He can attack in 6 different directions, upward, downward, if you do a dive attack while you're in the air, and you could do diagonally. Also, that would be 8 directions. Why does it say 6 directions? That's very confusing to me.
Can you not do downward and diagonal, maybe? Maybe just up and diagonal?
That's it. You can't do downward diagonal. Good call. Good call. Okay. But Eric's special ability is he can do this giant leap with his staff and leap straight up. So he can like reach platforms that John Morris cannot reach, which is pretty interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah, so the game is also like really well known for utilizing like Sega Genesis effects, because the console was pretty powerful, so they can do some pretty cool stuff. Like, for example, they have an area in the Leaning Tower of Pisa where it's like rotating, and it looks like the tower's rotating while you're in it. And they also have like some upside down rooms in the castle that do some pretty crazy stuff, like where it looks like it's rotating while you're walking inside of it, which I know now.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot, but back then was like, well, how are they doing this? You know? So
yeah, it's just magic.
Yeah, it's really cool. The development of the game, it was originally released as a side story of the Castlevania series, and the artwork for the North American version was once again done by our friend Tom Dubois, personal friend of the podcast. Never met him before. That sounds great. Okay. Toshiki Yamamura and Tasaki Seki were the ones that initially started the design of Bloodlines. They just did it on their own. They had once again, like our previous people that worked on Castlevania we talked about, never worked on a Castlevania game before, but respected the legacy, and they wanted to hold their sequel to like the original action platformer standard, but add their own twist, you know? So Bloodlines from the beginning is way more story focused than the other 2 games we talked about today. Yamamura was inspired by like novels and then also the historical figure of Elizabeth Bartley. And while he was researching this game, he actually like studied European history and World War II and read Bram Stoker's Dracula and like tried to put a story together that way. That would make sense and kind of help bring Castlevania more into the modern age than previously.
Nice.
The unique twist that the dev team implemented, though, was the multiple characters. That was their cool hook, was that you had these two characters that were kind of loosely pulled from Bram Stoker's Dracula. But the cool thing is there was actually two other characters that never made it. A hammer wielding, like it looks like kind of like a dwarf character from fantasy, but I don't think that's what they were going for. But their name is Bolt Erickson. And which is a great name, Bolt Erickson. And it was just like you had a giant hammer. And then there was an acrobat named Yoko Belnades, I think, or Belnades, Belnades, that was also in the game. But Yoko and Bolt Erickson didn't make a cut. But Yoko, though, is a descendant of Sypha from Castlevania 3. And Yoko would later appear in a game called Aria of Sorrow, which we will eventually talk about. So was going to be in this game, didn't make the cut, and then got brought into the big leagues later on. So that's good.
All right.
So one cool thing they did with this game is they actually did a contest in Mega Drive Fans magazine to design enemies and traps. So people submitted enemies and stage traps they could make. And so the winner of the enemies was the Flying Beetle Roller. That was designed by like a 14-year-old, which is pretty cool. They put it in the game. The Skeleton Monkey was the runner-up, and that bad guy is actually like really annoying. So it's kind of funny that a person designed it, and then they put it in the game, and it's like one of the most annoying bad guys to fight in the game. The sub-boss, the Silhouette Demon, won the gold prize for like stage trap. It's actually kind of cool. It's like, you know that picture where it's like the vases? It's a vase, but on either side of it, it looks like human faces. It's like symmetrical.
Oh, yeah. And you can like see it from different, if you look at it differently, you see it differently.
Yeah, that's what the Silhouette Demon is pretty much. And then the silver prize for the stage trap was the rotating blades obstacle. They're like these big discs that have indents in them, and you're safe in the indents, but you're not safe outside of it and stuff like that. Pretty cool stuff. So yeah, and if you won the contest, you got a gold or a silver cartridge based on the award you won, which I think is pretty neat.
Nice.
Yeah. So they actually had to postpone Bloodlines for 3 months to do some polishing on it. The running joke among the dev team was that the tapestry they'd hung for inspiration in the office had cursed them, which I think is kind of funny. They actually cut a lot of content out and replaced a lot of content, though, during this 3 months. They cut out an entire level that was in a ship of Dover. It was like a whole level that was going to be like essentially in this creepy ship. They also cut out and replaced some levels in a German factory. They also improved a lot of gameplay, though, too. Like, this is where they added the feature to jump from the stairs, which is kind of big, too, because it speeds up the action. And even though they had more memory, so they could add more levels if they wanted to, they decided to choose polish over more levels, which I thought was a good choice.
That's usually the right idea.
Yeah. So they did have some censorship issues in the PAL regions of Europe and Australia. So if you were in one of those regions, the word blood was cut out of the title. So it's called Castlevania The New Generation instead of Castlevania Bloodlines.
Couldn't even say blood.
Yeah. And instead of the blood on the title screen, you would see water instead.
It's basically the same thing.
Yeah, it's fine. So, and that was changed, I think, also in the American version. Oh, no. The North American and Japanese versions had blood dripping effects, and the European versions and the Australian versions did not. And they also made it so the zombies went from pink to green to make them look more cartoony. Because, green zombies, way less crazy than pink zombies. You can all agree. So the music of Bloodlines, this is kind of cool, was composed by Michiru Yamane, and she also did the scores for Castlevania Symphony of the Night and other Castlevania games. This was her first game doing it, and she is known as one of the best composers in the Castlevania musical genre, which is pretty crazy because they have some really... Castlevania music slaps. I'm going to say it right here, right now.
I hear good. Symphony of the Night has just a really good soundtrack. I should listen to it.
Yeah, and Bloodlines is really good too. So because of the technical limitations of the Sega Genesis, what Yamane decided to do is focus on just using an organ, but on 3 channels. So you have the organ just sounds way more full. It gives it more body and more sound, and it can do 3 different things. And then the 3 other channels, because it was 6 channels to use, one of them was for sound effects and the other 2 were for percussion. So that's how you get some real banging 16-bit music.
Organs.
Yep, that's it. And this is definitely considered to be another like hidden gem of the series. And the best way to play this, along with Super Castlevania IV, is the Anniversary Edition. I believe that Bloodlines and Castlevania IV are both on the Anniversary Edition, but Rondo of Blood is not. So, yeah, but I thought this was a really good, like, cool time period for Castlevania. It's definitely different.
Yeah, lots of different systems.
Lots of confusion. I think the big takeaway from this, though, and something that I kind of want to go into if we ever do a history of Konami, is this weird corporate culture. And I mean, I'm calling it that. I think it was just at a time when there were so many, like, you wanted to work for Konami. That should be something I should say immediately, is like, there was no shortage of people who wanted to be game devs at Konami in the 80s and 90s. And I think that kind of led to Konami having this super competitive culture, because in their mind they're like, well, we'll have a new person show up, anytime.
Yeah, so, we can replace you, so we can treat you like garbage.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is still, unfortunately, somewhat true in a lot of the games industry.
Yeah, and it's not okay, and we're not condoning it, but I think it's important to mention that, and it's why they wouldn't let them have their real names in the credits, or it's just little odd things like that. But I think the plan from here on out, by the way, is I'm going to do one more episode of Castlevania so I can cover Symphony of the Night, because if I don't do that, we're going to get so much angry mail. And then I am going to take a break from Castlevania, because I've been doing this now for this is the third week, so I'm ready to do something else. I actually have a really exciting one. I'm legitimately have not been more excited to do an episode than what we talked about last night, Tyler. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
But I am so excited to talk about this weird, obscure system thing that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. But before I do that, we'll do one more Castlevania. And Tyler, what you been playing?
Well, this week I've been playing mostly Persona 5 Strikers. Really starting to get into it. I'm 4 or 5 hours in. I had to do a little bit of level grinding to beat a sub boss that I was on, but I beat it. The level grinding is fun because it's just slashing through a million enemies at once. It's really satisfying. So yeah, I've been having fun with that. Playing a little bit of League of Legends at night, of course, and I think that kind of covers it as far as games I've been playing. I can't think of what else I've been playing. Last week I talked about getting the Platinum Trophy in Spider-Man, right? That was last week did I talk about that last week? I think so.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
Okay.
You mentioned that.
So, and then hopefully soon we're going to start up Halo 5, because we played through all the other Halo games when they were on PC, thinking that by the time we got to the end of them, they would have put 5 out on PC. They have not, and I'm a little antsy and would like to just play it. So
yeah, I just want to finish it at this point. It's been sitting on my playing or on deck area of my Trello for too long. We can blast through that in 3 sittings, I think.
Yeah. I've downloaded a bunch of games on Game Pass and haven't really played any of them, but I like to download them. So that's where I'm at now. What have you been playing?
I beat Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, not the DLC, but I just beat the original game, and it's on sale right now for 11 more days, by the way, the Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, or you can get it with the season pass, I think, for $1 or $2 more. So it's definitely worth it. Highly recommend it. I also started playing Super Metroid a bit, which is fun. I enjoy that just on Switch in my spare time. I think I'm going to try to move on to playing Golf Story, though, just so I can beat that. I'm trying to go through my backlog, and then I am playing Destiny now during the just downtime. I play the seasonal stuff each week, because it's actually really cool what they've been doing with the story each week. I really like it, and I like that I can just kind of pick it up for 2 or 3 hours a week and then put it down. And I don't really care about power level because I'm not trying to grind for anything, and it's good. So I'm enjoying that. Good. I did also download on Game Pass, because I just put a bunch of Bethesda games on there. Wolfenstein: The New Order, because that's the first one in the Bethesda line of newer Wolfenstein games, and I really want to try that out.
And they're supposed to be pretty good games.
Yeah, they are supposed to be good games, and they're just single player first person shooters. Just blast through them, and that's what I'm kind of feeling like right now. Also, I have bad news for me playing The Witcher 3. They apparently took it off of Game Pass in the middle of March, and I had no idea.
Whoops.
So I did try to boot that up this week, and then it was sorry, you don't have the subscription for this. And I was like, wait, what? So I think what I do, I wishlisted it on Steam, because I think I want to play it on PC anyway. And I will just, when it goes on sale, which it inevitably will, I will pick it up.
Make sure you check goodoldgames.com too, because they sell it directly.
Oh, okay. I'll do that too. Yeah, because I definitely want to play that. And I want to beat it. I want to beat Witcher 3 for me, and for our listeners. And so I can feel like I know more about the Netflix series when that comes back, because I did really like the Netflix series. So yeah, but we got some emails to read. We actually got quite a few emails to read.
Ooh.
First one's from, let me see, from Dr. Bug, Bugg. It says guests, ? I always like to hear your responses to Dark Paul's emails. I'm wondering if y'all ever invite guests to call in and discuss. Would love to hear this trio talk for an episode in the future, maybe. Hopefully this is an annoying question. Haha, love y'all. XOXO, Dr. Bug. It's not an annoying question, and we do at some point want to have guests on the show. The reason behind why we haven't is really logistics. Because the minute you get another third piece of audio in there is another... I get really nervous about making sure our audio is good, and sometimes it isn't, and it hurts me, because I don't notice something on my end or whatever. So I want to make sure it's good. So the answer is yes. We want to have guests, but we want to figure out a way to do it right. And if that means we have to use some sort of weird service where it records all of us separately and mashes it together, we might do that.
Yeah, I've got ideas for folks we should bring on too. I think.
Yeah.
That would be really fun to do. And it's also like scheduling is hard too, because we kind of do this when we both have time on the weekend, and throwing a third person in there just makes it that much harder to schedule stuff. But we could do it. We could do it.
It really does. Okay. So thank you though, Dr. Bug, for the email. Do you want to read this longtime listener, first time emailer email?
Yeah. Yeah. So this one comes from Brian. The coast of Maine. He says, greetings from the coast of Maine, Tyler and Mike. I'm a longtime listener to the show, and though I'm not caught up all the way yet, I look forward to the moments I get to catch an episode. I'm a stay-at-home dad, so I listen while doing dishes and laundry. I love your show, and as I am a video game collector, and always look forward to hearing what your next topic is. I've been collecting for about 10 years now, and have consoles and games ranging from the Atari 2600 to PS4 and Xbox One. I have attached a few photos of my collection and thought you guys would find interesting. Keep up the good work. I recently joined the Discord and look forward to connecting with the community. Big fan, Brian. And he did attach some photos, and he has a massive collection here. I hope that Brian posts these photos in the Discord, because people should see these. It's awesome.
Very impressive. I am very impressed with the collection, and I am actually still scrolling through the pictures. There's so many. Yeah. I love it.
A nice Xbox collection, 360. Oh man, right now is a really good time to be collecting 360 and PS3 games, because it's old enough that the games are dirt cheap, but not so old that they're like collector's items yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like this is the time to be picking those games up if you ever think about wanting to collect for those systems.
As you should, and then you can get some sort of, we would never recommend it, but you could get a modded Xbox and then just play all of them however you want too.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way to do it. Okay. Thank you for the email, Brian. Appreciate it. And you should share that. Oh, yes. From Matt in Japan. I am so excited. This email is titled Japanese Horror Stories Pizza. Hey, Mike and Tyler. Your discussion last week about pizza toppings you wouldn't eat prompted me to inform you about the horror of Japanese pizza toppings. While normal toppings, like pepperoni and sausage, do exist, they are far and few between. One of the most popular pizza topping combinations in Japan includes corn, shrimp, and mayonnaise. Domino's Japan also had a limited menu option of Tapioca Pizza, which was just a plain cheese pizza with boba tea pearls embedded into the cheese, and it came with a packet of honey that you would drizzle over it. It was about as good as it sounds. Not good, but not as bad as the aforementioned monstrosity. Sorry to make you guys lose your appetites, Matt in Japan. Okay, so I was really weirded out by corn, shrimp, and mayonnaise, and then we were having a discussion with a mutual friend that said Japanese mayo is different than American mayo. And now I'm curious.
Yeah, they say they use the whole egg instead of just the egg whites, which makes a big difference, I guess. And so it's like way better. So he's like, I buy it on Amazon. It gets shipped here. It's the best mayonnaise. So we'll have to try some.
So I want to ask Matt about that too, about Japanese mayo, so we can get a confirmation, because Matt is our on the scene expert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like to pretend we're a news station. That's what I like to pretend.
Do you think there's a video game history podcast in Japan where somebody sends emails like this, where they're like, American Horror Stories, pizza, and then they say they put pepperoni, pineapples, and tomato sauce on their pizzas, and like everybody on that podcast goes, oh, gross.
Or they fold their pizza and they call it a papadilla.
Yeah.
I had a papadilla, not worth it. Okay, so
Not worth it. Okay,
yeah, I mean,
good to know. I've been thinking about those.
I mean, it was fine. But it really was like just go buy a pizza and fold it in half. That's what it felt like to me. Okay, you want to read Hassan's email?
Yeah. Hassan says, "Hey guys, I'm following up on your great discussion last episode on knowing when to quit a game. One related issue that I often face is I have low attention span when it comes to starting a new game. Typically, if a game doesn't grab me within the first hour, I drop it entirely. There are so many games out there these days and not enough time to play them. My worry is that this causes me to miss out on games that I otherwise would have enjoyed if I continued playing. I would never have gotten to experience two of my favorite games of the last decade, Persona 5 and Breath of the Wild, if I didn't power through the first several hours. I'm currently having this issue with two of the most lauded games in recent memory. The Witcher 3, Mike, and God of War."
Oh, Hassan, you and I are two birds of a feather right now.
I'm the same. I played a couple hours of Witcher 3 and I couldn't get into it either. I don't know. I'm a few hours into each and can't find the motivation to continue. Some people say that you need to stick with The Witcher for like 30 hours before it really kicks in, but that's a lot of time to commit to a game before you know whether you'll like it. So my question to both of you is, what is your video game attention span, and do you think it causes you to miss out on gaming experiences? If so, how do you deal with it? Keep up the great podcasting, guys. Hassan.
Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
I can go first. I mean,
right.
It's it really depends on the game. I think I said this when we were talking about it before, but it's about being able to, if you're finding yourself not enjoying the time that you're spending on the game right now, but if you can see if you can see the light at the end of the tunnel of like, I can see how this will be fun once I make it out of the tutorial or once I get to the open world part of this game, then you have to do the calculation of like, well, is the bad times worth it for the good times? And that's going to be different for everyone. I think 30 hours is a long time to play a game before it kicks in, especially a single player game like The Witcher, which I know is a very, very long game, but I think that's still a long time. With a game like an MMO or something like that, like Final Fantasy XIV, if somebody said they played for 30 hours and they didn't really like it, I mean, I wouldn't say you should play more because obviously, like, I'm not going to make people play something they don't like, but the game definitely changes significantly after that. Like once you finish the storyline and are doing end game stuff, it's very different. World of Warcraft is similar. Like I feel like it took about 30 hours for me to get through the expansion content, and then after that's when like the raiding and stuff starts. So but it's also hard to be like, just stick with it and waste your life for 30 hours to get to the fun stuff when there are games that you can play right now that are fun immediately or fun after a few hours. So yeah, it's a personal thing. You just got to make the call, and I'm sure I've missed out on games that I would have liked to play, but there's a lot of games to play and you can't play them all. So
it's true. Also, the older you get, the harder it is, I feel like, too, as far as like just having the time, right now I'm like so up in like coding boot camp school. Like I can't focus on I can't jump in and out of the game like The Witcher 3, it's like, cause I feel like with that game, you got to like remember where you're at, remember what you were doing each time you log in. I can't do that. But to answer your question, what is your video game attention span? Mine is also short now. It is me.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten shorter.
It's gotten shorter. And does it cause me to miss out on gaming experiences? Probably. But when I think about it in retrospect, if it's not going to grab me, it's not going to grab me. Mm-hmm. Like I tried playing, what was it? Battlefield Bad Company 1 and 2 on Xbox One, and they're ports of the old games, and it just didn't. There was a lot of quality of life things that are in modern shooters that without those, you're like, man, I forgot how hard it is. I forgot how really like, and so I just put them down. I just uninstalled them, and I think Game Pass makes me do that way more now. For example, if
the easy access to lots of high quality titles makes it so like your game needs to be good at the start or I'm going to put it down.
Yeah. I mean, I even put down another game I never talked about putting down in here, but I was playing the first Ori and the Blind Forest? Mm-hmm. That's the first one.
That's Metroidvania.
Yeah. And I started playing that and I was like, this game is lauded as being really good. And I could see how it was good, but I just wasn't feeling it. A lot of it's a mood thing too. Like I got to be in the mood for a first person shooter, or I got to be in the mood to sit and play an RPG for like 40 to 50 hours. And that mood hasn't struck lately. And I think I deal with it by realizing, I could still get to this game down the line and it's not a big deal. And you should play what you feel like playing and what makes you have fun. And to go back to Tyler's point, like don't play MMO for 30 hours if you're not having fun. You should have stopped an hour or two in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So But that's a great question. Thank you, Hassan. All right. Do you want me to do the next email?
Yeah.
This is from Old Man Ryan, I believe. I think it's the email. So here we go. Okay. I miss not sending in emails to the best video game podcast this side of the Mississippi. Hopefully, this is another Metroidvania episode that I wanted to give a shout out to the new longest name ever, Record of Lodos War Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth, for being the game of my life. Has been missing since. I last played Metroid Zero Mission for the first time. Totally worth the $12. You can get it for $12. Wow.
Okay.
Anyways, fellas, keep up the radical work, and I'll be tuning in at my usual start of the day on Monday morning, sent from my Jaybird device.
Wow, sent it straight from the Apple II.
Straight from the Apple II. He's got iMessenger on Apple II now. It's pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much.
Apple puts out updates to their old stuff for a long time. Still getting updates for the Apple II.
So I'm happy we were there to make another Metroidvania episode for Old Man Ryan. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You want to read the last one?
Yep. Last one's from Burger Champ. Says, howdly doodly, histerinos. That's my Ned Flanders impression.
It was good. It was very good.
Thanks. Burger Champ has got a tale to spin, followed by an interactive segment. When my brother and I were much younger, we played a lot of Super Mario Kart Battle Mode, but with our own very specific rules. I won't even try to explain our overly complicated process. Suffice it to say, it made Battle Mode so much better. Are there any games where you have challenged yourself by creating your own custom rules or restrictions that aren't naturally part of the game? Keep on keeping us informed. Burger Champ.
Thank you, Burger. That's a really good question. I actually had my own Mario Kart 64 rule when I was playing Battle Mode with my brother, and that was that if you have a green shell, you have to fire it on the block fort level, because it would make it so there were two games going on in block fort. It was don't get hit by my brother, but also don't fall off the blocks, because there's like 50 green shells zipping around down there. And that was like a really fun little like own house rule. I love this idea of like house rules though, because this is where things like the Nuzlocke run and Pokemon came from, or the random
that's what
remixes.
I was gonna say.
That old man, I almost said old man Matt from Japan. That Matt in Japan actually played one of the remixes on our Discord a couple days ago, which is very awesome. And I love that people are streaming on our Discord. That's great. So make sure to catch that. But yeah, I love this idea of your own specific house rules. Another one is, I think, in the Nintendo hockey game Blades of Steel, which is a very good game, if you got in a fight, you had to fight it. You couldn't like leave it.
Can't run away.
Can't run away. Yeah, that's another rule. All right. Do you have any rules though from your own specific gaming?
I can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, I've definitely done like Nuzlocke runs before on Pokemon, which is basically like puts heavy restrictions on how many Pokemon you're allowed to catch, and if a Pokemon faints, you have to release it. So it's like it's dead forever.
Yeah.
Some people do Nuzlocke runs where they're not allowed to use Pokemon centers, and so they only can like restore health with items and stuff like that. That's way too hardcore for me.
Cruel to the Pokemon also.
Yeah, very. But yeah, otherwise can't remember any specific special rules. We probably had some Mario Kart 64 rules, or I'm trying to think of some of the other multiplayer games that we played. We did a lot of watching each other play, my brother and I. We didn't do too many like competitive games. We would either play co-op games or take turns like trying to get further in a single player game. So I don't have a whole lot of special house rules. Yeah,
I do like like that aspect of YouTube though, of people making their own rules and playing games that way has been really fun. Like I really enjoyed the Peacecraft World of Warcraft video series on YouTube, where he tried to play World of Warcraft with zero violence and had to run from like each area to another, which just meant he would just die a bazillion times. But people slowly found him and helped him, and it was really good. So things like that was a McElroy thing on Polygon, I think, and that was really fun. So yeah, I would love to hear other people's house rules though. If you have house rules for games when you played as kids, or even now, I want to know about them, because this is awesome. And this is a great question from Burger Champ. So, and it's something I want to circle back to if we do another mailbag episode, and to see if we get some stuff from other people that come in, because I would love to read people's house rules on the air if that's the case. So I don't know why I just decided to use house rules as the name of it, but that's what we're going to call it. So
yeah. When we used to play Super Mario 64, we would take turns, me and like a bunch of other people at the same time. We would take turns, and you would have to hand the control over when you got a game over. So we had a rule that you couldn't get extra lives because I'm sure somebody, maybe it was me, went and got 1 million extra lives and never had to give their turn up.
Oh, like champion status? Yeah, I see. I see you out here, Tyler. Yeah, that's a great. I think in Perfect Dark also for N64, because we played a lot of that game with the bots. Like everyone was like, you can't use the laptop gun. We would always turn the laptop gun off, but because it was just so cheap. But yeah, I love this. So if you have your own special rules you want to send to us in games you played growing up or now, you can send us an email at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. And you could also join our Discord by emailing us or by going to my Twitter at Mecoletta, MECOLETTA, and clicking on the pinned link at the top, and that'll give you a Discord invite. You can also find Tyler on Twitter at SneakerElf, ELPH. And we also got some new ratings on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for that. I haven't checked the international ones, but if you give us an international review and you want us to read it on the air, feel free to send me an email. And yeah, I think that's it. So what do we got going on next week? Is it a surprise next week? Or are we doing more Metroid? Yes.
I think it's more Metroid because we got to talk about Metroid Prime. We got to talk about Metroid Fusion.
Oh, there's so much Metroid left. So stay tuned to next week. And thank you so much for listening. And do you want to say bye to everybody, Tyler?
Goodbye, everybody.